In a residential neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio, where autumn evenings arrive early, Rachel Martin stood in her kitchen preparing dinner. She had been working as a librarian at the city's public library for 15 years. Outside the window, she could hear the voices of neighborhood children enjoying their last playtime of the day. "Mom, at school today." 8-year-old Emma had finished her homework and came running into the kitchen. With her golden hair tied in a ponytail, Emma was the most beautiful treasure in Rachel's eyes. Her large blue eyes, so much like her mother's, sparkled as she began telling about the day's events. "Mrs. Johnson praised my book report. And guess what? I get to read it at next week's presentation." Rachel smiled as she gently stroked her daughter's head. "That's wonderful, Emma. I'm looking forward to it." Since her husband Michael frequently traveled as a pharmaceutical sales representative, weekday evenings were always spent this way, just mother and daughter together. Michael seemed more passionate about his work than when they first married, and it wasn't unusual for him to be away more than half the month. "When is Daddy coming home?" Emma asked. "Next Wednesday. He's making rounds through Chicago and Detroit this time, so it's a longer trip than usual." Rachel paused and felt a slight dizziness. Lately, these symptoms had been occurring frequently. Morning nausea, afternoon fatigue, and evening dizziness. She figured it was probably a combination of work stress and the burden of caring for her daughter alone. "Mom, are you okay?" Emma looked up with concern. "Yes, I'm fine. Just a little tired," Rachel answered brightly, not wanting to worry her daughter. As she continued preparing dinner, Rachel thought about her husband's recent changes. Michael had been traveling more than before, and even when he was home, he never let go of his cell phone. He explained that work had gotten busier, but sometimes she could hear him talking to someone on the phone for long periods in the middle of the night. "Emma, could you set the table?" "Yes, Mom." Emma obediently began arranging the forks and knives. However, Rachel had recently noticed subtle changes in her daughter's behavior. Emma, who used to genuinely look forward to her father's return home, lately seemed to cloud over whenever Michael became a topic of conversation. She thought it was probably just the whims of an 8-year-old child, but a mother's intuition sensed something was off. After dinner, Rachel sat on the sofa with her daughter for their reading time together. Emma nestled securely in her mother's lap, listening to her favorite fairy tale. This quiet, peaceful time was the most precious moment of Rachel's day. "Mom, it would be okay if it was just the two of us forever, right?" Emma's sudden murmur surprised Rachel a little. "Why would you ask such a thing?" "Oh, nothing," Emma shook her head slightly. "I just like being with you the most." Rachel hugged her daughter close. Even on nights when her husband wasn't there, this small family certainly existed. And this ordinary, peaceful daily life was what mattered most to them. The following Monday, Rachel was working at the library but couldn't concentrate. She needed to take frequent breaks due to severe headaches and nausea that had continued since the weekend. Her colleague Betty approached with concern. "Rachel, you look terrible. Don't you think you should go home early?" Betty had been Rachel's colleague since she started working at the library and cared for her like an older sister. "I'm fine, Betty. Just a little tired," Rachel forced a smile, but had to lean against the bookshelf to support herself. "This isn't ordinary fatigue. You need to see a doctor," Betty's voice carried serious concern. That afternoon, Rachel left work early and went to pick up Emma from school. She felt slight dizziness while driving and had to take deep breaths several times at red lights. When Emma got in the car, instead of starting to talk about the day's events with her usual bright smile, her daughter was unusually quiet. "Emma, how was school today?" "It was okay," Emma answered briefly, gazing out the window. When they got home, Rachel began preparing dinner. However, just standing in the kitchen made her short of breath, and she had to sit down several times. Emma watched her mother with worry while doing her homework. "Mom, why don't we order pizza today?" Emma suggested. "No, homemade food is better for you." Rachel forced herself to stand up and took ingredients from the refrigerator. When dinner time came, Emma's behavior became even stranger. Her daughter, who usually had a hearty appetite, was just poking at her food with her fork and barely eating anything. Rachel herself couldn't eat much due to nausea. "Emma, what's wrong? Does your stomach hurt?" "No." Emma shook her head slightly, but tears were welling up in her eyes. "Mom, when did you say Daddy was coming home?" "Wednesday." "Why are you so worried about it? Do you want to see Daddy?" Emma shook her head frantically. "No, that's not it. It's just..." Looking at her daughter struggling for words, Rachel felt a deep anxiety. Emma's expression seemed to hide something too heavy for an 8-year-old child to bear. The next day, Tuesday, Rachel's condition worsened. She was hit with severe dizziness and nausea from the moment she woke up and couldn't even take Emma to school. She asked Mrs. Wilson, who lived next door, to take Emma to school. Alone, Rachel lay on the sofa thinking about her symptoms. At first she thought it was work stress, but the symptoms were too severe and were beginning to interfere with her daily life. Perhaps it was some serious illness. In the afternoon, when Emma came home from school, Rachel desperately tried to smile so as not to worry her daughter. "Mom, are you okay today?" Emma touched her mother's forehead with her small hand. "I'm feeling a little better. I'll go see a doctor tomorrow, so don't worry." That night, Rachel heard Emma muttering something in her bedroom. When she approached the door and listened carefully, she could hear her daughter praying in a small voice. "God, please. Please protect my mom. Don't let Daddy..." The voice cut off there. Rachel felt her heart beating like a drum. What was her 8-year-old daughter about to pray regarding her father? Wednesday morning, Rachel visited the local hospital. After conducting detailed tests, Dr. Harris tilted his head. "Looking at your blood test results, I don't see any particular abnormalities. However, there are signs of mild anemia and dehydration. Have you been eating properly lately?" "I haven't had much appetite. I've been having continuous nausea. It might be caused by stress or overwork. Let's monitor the situation for a while, and if your symptoms don't improve, please come back. Also, please make sure to stay hydrated and get as much rest as possible." Still not satisfied with the doctor's diagnosis, Rachel headed home. The inconclusive result only increased her anxiety. That evening, Michael returned from his business trip. When Rachel heard the front door open, she didn't miss the momentary tension in Emma's expression. "I'm home," Michael's cheerful voice echoed. "Welcome home, Michael." Rachel went to greet her husband at the entrance despite feeling unwell. Michael frowned when he saw his wife's face. "Rachel, you look pale. Are you all right?" "I haven't been feeling well lately. I saw a doctor today, but he said there was nothing particularly wrong." "I see. You're probably tired from being busy at work. You'll surely feel better if you get some rest." Michael placed his hand on his wife's shoulder, but there was something unsettling about his smile. Emma sat as if hiding behind the sofa, avoiding eye contact with her father. Even when Michael spoke to his daughter, Emma's responses were small and vague. At dinner, Michael cheerfully talked about his business trip. However, Rachel felt nauseous every time she brought food to her mouth and could hardly eat anything. Emma also continued to avoid her meal and, while pretending to listen to her father's stories, occasionally looked at her mother with concern. "I don't want to be with Daddy." After her husband headed to his study, Emma suddenly murmured in a small voice. "What?" Rachel asked back. "Nothing." Emma frantically shook her head and ran upstairs to her room. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep for a long time. Her worsening health, her daughter's strange behavior, and an inexplicable sense of anxiety, everything overlapped and weighed heavily on her heart. Listening to her sleeping husband's breathing beside her, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that she was overlooking something important. Thursday evening, Michael left for another business trip. This time he was scheduled to visit Oklahoma and Texas for a week-long trip. As she saw off her husband carrying his suitcase at the entrance, Rachel had mixed feelings. While there was the burden of caring for her daughter alone while her husband was away, seeing Emma's recent behavior made her feel that perhaps her daughter was more comfortable when her father wasn't around. "Have a safe trip," Rachel waved from the doorway. "Don't push yourself when you're not feeling well. Please take care of Emma too." Michael kissed his wife and headed to his car. Emma watched from the second-floor window until her father's car disappeared from view, but the moment the car turned the corner, she clearly showed an expression of relief. Rachel didn't miss that expression. When dinner time came, Emma's change became even more pronounced. At the dinner table without her father, her daughter began eating normally for the first time in a while. However, Rachel's own condition remained poor, and she was hit with strong nausea after just a few bites. "Mom, are you feeling sick again?" Emma asked with concern. "I'm fine. I'm sure I'll feel better soon." Rachel smiled to avoid worrying her daughter, but actually the symptoms seemed to be getting worse day by day. That night, Rachel was watching TV in the living room with Emma. As usual, her daughter snuggled close to her mother's side, enjoying her favorite program. However, during a commercial break, Emma suddenly turned around and looked at her mother with a serious expression. "Mom, couldn't we live somewhere else, just the two of us?" Rachel looked at her daughter in surprise. "Why would you say such a thing, Emma? This is your home." "But..." Emma hesitated, then took her mother's hand with her small one. "Isn't Mom always sick because we're living in this house?" These were words too heavy to come from an 8-year-old child's mouth. Rachel squeezed her daughter's hand back and asked gently, "Emma, is there something you're worried about? Can you tell your mother?" Emma was quiet for a long time, but eventually nodded slightly. "Mom, you feel better when Daddy's not here, don't you?" The observation was too accurate, and Rachel herself was surprised. Indeed, since Michael had left for his business trip, her headaches had somewhat subsided. However, she had thought it was just a coincidence. "That's just by chance. Daddy works very hard for us." But Emma's voice began to tremble. "Is Daddy really working for us?" Friday night, Rachel was trying to go to bed early. Although her condition had improved somewhat, she still felt fatigued. Emma had also finished her homework in her room and was preparing to sleep earlier than usual. However, around 2 in the morning, Rachel was awakened by her daughter's crying. At first she thought Emma had had a bad dream, but the crying didn't stop. Worried, she went to her daughter's room to find Emma shaking and crying on her bed. "Emma, what's wrong? Did you have a bad dream?" Rachel sat on her daughter's bed and hugged the small body. "Mom. Mom." Emma clung to her mother and continued crying intensely. "It's okay, Mommy's here." Rachel gently rubbed her daughter's back while desperately trying to comfort her. However, Emma's crying wouldn't stop. As if all the fear and anxiety she had been holding in for a long time was pouring out, her daughter continued crying in her mother's chest. "Emma, tell your mother. What's so frightening?" Emma raised her tear-streaked face and looked at her mother. In those eyes was a despair too heavy for an 8-year-old child to bear. "Mom, please, divorce him right now. I can't wait anymore." Rachel gasped. She never imagined the word divorce would come from her 8-year-old daughter's mouth. "Emma, why would you say such a thing? Please, Mom." Emma grabbed her mother's arm and desperately pleaded. "You can't stay with Daddy. You're going to die. Die. Emma, what on earth are you?" "I saw it." Emma's voice trembled even more. "I saw Daddy in the kitchen." Rachel's heart began beating violently. She was afraid to understand what her daughter's words meant. What did you see? Emma, tell your mother. Emma was quiet for a long time, but eventually began speaking in a trembling voice. Last Monday night, I woke up to go to the bathroom. When I was about to go downstairs, I heard sounds from the kitchen. I saw Daddy there, so I thought I'd ask for some water and approached. Rachel listened intently to her daughter's every word. Then I saw Daddy take your food out of the refrigerator and sprinkle something from a small bottle on it. Something like white powder. Rachel's blood froze. At first I thought it was seasoning, but Daddy's face looked really scary. So I hid and watched, and then Daddy put it back in the refrigerator and took the small bottle to his study. Emma, that was. The next day, you got really sick, didn't you? Emma's tears began flowing again. I realized it. Daddy's putting something strange in your food. Rachel's body stiffened. Her daughter's testimony began organizing in her head. The timing of her own health problems, the symptoms easing during her husband's business trips, the reason Emma didn't want to eat, everything connected in a single line. Emma, did you really see this? Are you sure? I'm sure, Emma nodded firmly. That's why I was scared to eat the same things as you. When Daddy was home, I tried not to eat as much as possible. Thinking that her 8-year-old daughter had been carrying such a terrifying secret alone made Rachel's chest feel like it would burst. Why didn't you tell me until now? I thought you wouldn't believe me. And if Daddy found out, next time I might also. Emma choked on her words. Rachel held her daughter tightly. I'm sorry, Emma, for making you carry such a heavy burden alone. Mom, please. Call the police. If this continues, you're going to die. Rachel's trembling fingers reached for her cell phone. Her love for her husband, her wishes for their family, everything crumbled in an instant. However, what mattered most now was her own life and, above all, the safety of this brave daughter. Emma finally showed an expression of relief on her mother's lap. She had finally been freed from the fear she had carried alone for so long. Late at night, Columbus police patrol cars quietly slipped into the quiet residential neighborhood. Emma stood hiding behind her mother, gripping her mother's robe with her small hands. You're Mrs. Martin. I'm Detective Johnson. A female police officer politely introduced herself. Behind her stood a young male officer and a forensics team. Please tell us more about the details of your report. Also about what your daughter witnessed. Rachel led the police officers into the living room and sat on the sofa with Emma. Her daughter still snuggled close to her mother and occasionally looked anxiously at the officers. My daughter Emma says she witnessed my husband putting something in my food, Rachel began explaining in a trembling voice. It seems to coincide with the timing of my recent health problems. Detective Johnson took out her notebook and began recording the details. What specific symptoms have you been experiencing? Severe headaches, nausea, dizziness, and fatigue. The symptoms worsen when my husband is home and ease somewhat when he's on business trips. Emma, can you tell us what you saw? Detective Johnson spoke to her daughter in a gentle voice. Emma buried her face in her mother's lap, but eventually began speaking in a small voice. Last Monday night, when I got up to use the bathroom, I saw it. I saw Daddy putting white powder on Mommy's food in the kitchen. Where did that white powder come from? From a small bottle. After he finished, Daddy took that bottle to his study. Detective Johnson exchanged glances with her colleague. Mrs. Martin, where is your husband currently? He's on a business trip in Oklahoma. He left Friday for a week-long trip. I understand. Could we have your permission to search the house? We'd particularly like to focus on the kitchen and study. Rachel agreed without hesitation. The forensics team entered the house and began carefully searching for evidence. Emma watched the work with interest from her mother's lap. The relief of being freed from fear was showing on her daughter's face. 2 hours later, the leader of the forensics team rushed up to Detective Johnson. "Detective, we found it." The male forensics officer brought an evidence bag. Inside was a small glass bottle with something written in small letters on a white label. "We found it hidden in the back of a desk drawer in the study." Detective Johnson received the evidence bag and read the label. Her expression became grim. "It's an arsenic compound. A substance called arsenic acid that causes chronic poisoning when ingested in small amounts. The symptoms perfectly match what Mrs. Martin has been experiencing." Rachel gasped. The reality that her husband had truly been trying to poison her was thrust before her. "We found other things too," another forensics officer approached. "We detected trace amounts of arsenic in food items in the refrigerator. Particularly high concentrations in foods that appear to be Mrs. Martin's exclusively." Emma murmured quietly, "I knew it, what I saw was real." Detective Johnson gently stroked her daughter's head. "Emma, you were very brave. You saved your mother's life." As the investigation progressed, even more serious facts came to light. Records were discovered on the study computer showing that Michael had been researching life insurance. The life insurance policy on Rachel had been increased from the original $100,000 when they married to $500,000 recently. "Your husband significantly increased the insurance amount 6 months ago. The purchase of the poison also began around that time," Detective Johnson reported. There was an even more shocking discovery. Analysis of Michael's cell phone call records and messages revealed the existence of a mistress. The woman was a Chicago resident named Samantha Davis. Based on the message content, it appears your husband was planning a new life with her. There were multiple exchanges of messages like, "Once everything is settled, let's move to the West Coast together." Rachel held her head. The man she thought was her loving husband had actually been trying to kill her for insurance money. And he had been planning a new life with another woman. Perhaps their 10-year marriage had all been a lie. "Mom, are you okay?" Emma looked up at her mother with concern. "Yes, I'm fine. Thanks to your courage in telling the truth, we were saved." At 7 a.m, an arrest warrant was issued for Michael. In cooperation with police in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Michael was taken into custody at his hotel. The charges were attempted murder and insurance fraud. When Rachel heard the news over the phone, she was hit with complex emotions. Relief, anger, sadness, and feelings of betrayal all mixed together. "Mrs. Martin," Detective Johnson spoke gently. "You need to receive detailed medical examination at a hospital immediately. We must begin treatment for chronic arsenic poisoning." "I want to go with you," Emma said in a firm tone. "Of course. But what about school?" "I'll stay home today and be with Mom. I'll explain to my teacher later." Hospital tests revealed arsenic levels in Rachel's body that were 10 times higher than normal. According to the doctor, if she had continued ingesting it at that rate for a few more weeks, it would have become life-threatening. Fortunately, we discovered it in the early stages of chronic poisoning. "With proper treatment, we can expect a complete recovery," the attending physician explained. Meanwhile, Michael initially denied the charges during interrogation, but eventually confessed to the crime due to physical evidence and testimony from his mistress Samantha. Samantha claimed she initially hadn't been informed about Michael's plan, but recently he had approached her saying, "Let's get married once my wife dies from illness." Rachel sat on the hospital bed with Emma, looking out the window. The afternoon sunlight warmed the room. "Emma, thank you so much. If it weren't for you, I would have." "Mom," Emma took her mother's hand. "We can be together forever now, right? No one will bother us anymore." "Yes, that's right. Let's start a new life together, just the two of us." 1 year later, in the spring, at the Columbus County District Court in Ohio, the verdict for Michael Martin was announced. He received a 25-year prison sentence for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and multiple related charges. Rachel and Emma, sitting in the gallery, quietly watched that moment. After the verdict, Rachel left the courthouse holding her daughter's hand. Emma, now 9 years old, had grown much taller than a year ago, and brightness had returned to her expression. "Mom, it's all over now," Emma looked up at her mother and said. "Yes, it's truly over," Rachel smiled. "Now our new story begins, just ours." The year following the incident had not been an easy journey. It took 6 months to completely remove the arsenic from Rachel's body, during which time frequent hospital visits and drug therapy were necessary. Fortunately, as the doctor predicted, she made a complete recovery and now felt healthier than before the incident. Psychological recovery took even longer. The shock of having love and trust for her husband of 10 years crumble overnight was more serious than imagined. However, through repeated sessions with a professional counselor and participation in support groups with women who had similar experiences, she was gradually able to heal her emotional wounds. Emma also received regular sessions with the school counselor. The experience of witnessing her father's terrifying crime at age 8 and bearing the heavy responsibility of reporting it to adults had deeply affected her heart. However, children's resilience is wonderful, and with proper support, Emma continued healthy growth. Her work at the library also became a great support for Rachel. Betty and everyone at work provided warm support. Even when the incident was reported in the local newspaper, library users continued to treat her kindly. Rather, many people were moved by Emma's brave actions and sent numerous letters and cards of encouragement. "Mom, flowers were delivered to the library today, weren't they?" Emma asked when she came home from school. "Yes, from a third-grade class at an elementary school in the neighboring town. They wrote that they were inspired by your story." Emma smiled happily. "Did I really do something that amazing?" "You did something very amazing. You didn't just save my life, you saved our future together." Financially, the situation had also improved. The life insurance policy Michael had taken out was naturally invalidated, but the insurance company paid compensation following the incident. Also, the house that had been in Michael's name became Rachel's property through the divorce proceedings. Life that would have been difficult on just a librarian's salary was now stable. The biggest change was in the mother-daughter relationship. While they had been a close parent and child before the incident, now a true partnership built on deep understanding and trust had been established. Emma was not only a precious daughter to her mother but also a comrade who had overcome life's difficulties together. "Emma, what are you planning to write about for next month's school essay presentation?" Rachel asked while preparing dinner. "I'm going to write on the theme, about real family," Emma answered while doing her homework. "I'm going to write that family isn't just about being related by blood, but about people who truly care for each other and protect one another." Rachel stopped what she was doing and looked at her daughter. "That's a wonderful idea. I'm sure it will be an essay that touches everyone's hearts." That night, Rachel sat on the sofa with Emma, reading their favorite book. Outside the window, spring rain was quietly falling, announcing the season of new greenery. "Mom, we're happy, aren't we?" Emma looked up from her book and said. "We really are. Because you're here with me, I'm very happy." "Me too. Because you're here with me, I'm not afraid of anything." The two smiled at each other and turned their attention back to the book. With the gentle sound of rain outside serving as a lullaby, mother and daughter spent peaceful time together. Having overcome the ordeal that began with that terrifying night a year ago, they had become a true family in every sense of the word, a family bound not just by blood, but by bonds of deep love and mutual protection.